Next, from Chicago, State Comptroller Leslie Munger faces off in a debate with Susana Mendoza, the City Clerk of Chicago and Democrat candidate for State Comptroller. This runs about 30 minutes.
$9.5 billion. That is the current backlog of unpaid bills facing the state of Illinois, according to the State Comptroller's Office. With Illinois' stopgap budget due to expire at the end of the year and no full state budget on the horizon, the state's fiscal picture is precarious. One of the offices on next month's ballot is Illinois Comptroller, who is responsible for maintaining state accounts and ordering payments into and out of those accounts. In other words, writing the state's checks. Two candidates running for Illinois Comptroller join us now. Democrat Susana Mendoza, former state representative and current City Clerk of Chicago. And the current Comptroller, Republican Leslie Munger. She's a former business executive who was appointed after the death of Judy Topinka. This program is being live streamed on our website for those outside our viewing area or without a TV. And, welcome both of you to Chicago tonight. And first of all, just to clarify, Leslie Munger, you were telling me before we went on the air that even though it's spelled comptroller, that the common usage is controller, so let's go with common usage. And I'll begin with the incumbent. You've described dealing with the state budget crisis as triage. Explain what you mean and why that has been your approach.
Well, normally, if we have a budget in place, that's the legal authority for me as the controller to pay the state's bills. Without a budget, we're running our state via court orders, consent decrees, continuing appropriations that provide the legal authority to make payments on behalf of the state. But the courts don't tie any payments to what our actual revenues are coming in. So every month we spend money that we do not have. On average, somewhere between $400 to $500 million more goes out every month than comes into the state.
So how have you decided which checks to write and which checks to hold back?
So I work really hard to try and pay them in a first in, first out basis as we can, although we need to prioritize payments required by the court orders. There are pay dates for our debt on our service on our debt, on school payments as an example. There are various developmentally disabled. Those get paid first. And then after that, we pay as we can in line, but we've been prioritizing in my office payments to human service organizations that literally are about to close their doors to try and keep them open.
Susana Mendoza, is there anything you would have done differently than Comptroller Munger to deal with the state's financial shortfall? The fact that if you're writing checks and there's very little in the account, which checks do you write first?
Sure. Well, certainly I would not have prioritized paying bonuses to. Just this week we found out over 1,100 state employees, per the direction of Governor Rauner, received bonuses upwards of $3 million. And back in August, the Comptroller also approved bonuses for IDOT employees totaling over $4.1 million at the very same time that she's telling people that there's no money for social services. So it is an important office because this is taxpayer money. And not only should we have an independently elected comptroller who will be a fiscal watchdog, but also somebody who's running that office with a moral compass, who understands that the most vulnerable people in the state of Illinois should really be prioritized, certainly over anybody receiving a performance bonus at a time where we're in our worst fiscal crisis of all time.
How about that, Leslie Munger? The Rauner administration is giving one-time bonuses totaling $3 to $4 million to non-union workers whose bosses say they're doing exceptional work. Is it okay to do that at a time when the state is billions behind on its bills?
Perhaps Susana doesn't understand what the role of the Comptroller's office is in actually paying the bills. The payroll tapes come into our office. We don't know what is in those tapes. We don't. That is up to the individual agencies and various groups to decide what they are paying. And once those come in, I have to run it because I'm under court order to pay all state employees on those various timetables.
Including bonuses?
Yeah, because those come in, there's no clarity in the tapes as to whether it's a bonus or not. Those are decisions made in the individual offices by the agencies and the governor, or if it were the attorney general, any of their groups. Those payrolls come in a total group. There's no way to determine which is a bonus, which is pay.
Susana
and so
Mendoza?
you have
Yes,
bound
thank
to
you,
pay
Phil,
those.
because I actually do have a very good, solid understanding of what the office does, because one of my key advisors happens to be former Comptroller Dan Hines. And one of the first things that I will do when elected comptroller is what she could have already done but hasn't, and that's to issue an accounting bulletin to every single state agency and ask them for full transparency in how much money is being spent on base salary and how much money is being paid out in bonuses. That could have been done, it should have been done, but frankly, it's Governor Rauner who's running this office. She just accepted from the person who she's supposed to be a checks and balance to last week, a check for $1 million. By Constitution, the Illinois Comptroller's office should be an independently elected office that serves as a watchdog over other executive officers. This is really unbelievable.
How about that, Ms. Munger? You've accepted $7 million from two of Governor Rauner's wealthy backers and $1 million from the governor himself. How can you act independently in light of that financial support?
Well, first of all, some of that money was transferred out to back to the party and to other candidates. It's not all coming into me. My opponent has actually received several, excuse me, I'm speaking. My opponent has actually received plenty of money from special interests herself, including contracts that she's gotten, money from companies she's given out contracts to, and money from Speaker Madigan himself.
That's not true.
With respect to the Illinois Democrat Party is run by Speaker Madigan. Can I please finish?
Sure.
I was quiet when you were speaking. With respect to my independence with the governor, I've actually stood up to the governor right away when I took office. He asked me to withhold fair share union dues. I told him I couldn't do that. I stood up to the Attorney General when I went to court to make sure that we could pay state employees, and she sued me to stop. I went in with my own lawyers, and we're paying state employees because I went to court for that.
Okay, a couple of examples, a quick response from Susana Mendoza.
Well, again, first of all, I have not accepted money from Speaker Madigan,
Yes, you
and
have
the
the Illinois
entire
Democrat
Illinois
Party.
GOP is funded 99% by Governor Rauner, whereas the Democratic Party of Illinois, who has supported me, is funded by over thousands of people who support democratic principles, not fully or even partially funded by the Speaker. But hold on.
Okay, hold on.
To that point,
because
yes.
according to your reports, you have received campaign funds from Speaker Madigan's Democratic Party of Illinois and various labor groups. To what extent does that compromise your independence?
It does not, because the Democratic Party of Illinois is not the personal piggy bank of Speaker Madigan, unlike the Illinois GOP, which has also given her money. That is funded by thousands of Democrats who believe in core democratic principles. Speaker Madigan's campaign funds have not contributed to my account, nor have I asked them. But even if they had, which they haven't, it is not the job of the comptroller to serve as a checks and balance on the legislative branch. By Constitution, that office was created to serve as a checks and balance on the governor. It is not an office that should be receiving checks into our campaign accounts by the very person we're supposed to oversee. And I'd like to talk about the fact that on this show, Comptroller Munger has just admitted that she is allowing her campaign account, Citizens for Leslie Munger, to be used as a legal laundering mechanism. So not only has she gone from being the state's chief fiscal officer, she's now admitted to being the state's chief fiscal launderer, and that's unacceptable.
Okay,
The
how
laws
about
that I'm following
because you have been criticized for shifting roughly $3 million from your campaign fund to the campaign fund of other candidates to avoid campaign finance limits. The Sun-Times editorial said it was not illegal, just lousy.
It's not illegal because Susana Mendoza voted for the law that allowed that.
That was not the legislative intent.
It was.
The legislative intent.
Let her answer, and I'll get back to you, Ms.
Thank you.
Mendoza.
So it has been normal. In fact, everything I've done has been completely transparent and completely legal under the law.
Correct. Yeah.
Completely legal.
Okay.
Passed. That's what I said was legal. Completely transparent and completely legal. Following the law passed by the Democrats in the Illinois legislature a number of years ago. And it has been standard practice for money to come in through the Speaker to go out to candidates all over. And I think it's important for us to remember that when this money comes in, the governor has not bought me. In fact, I'm probably the most independent person here because I don't need this job. I took this role because I love Illinois. I had my career in the private sector. I spent 20 years volunteering for a human service organization that serves developmentally disabled adults. I accepted this appointment because I want to help our state get back on a good fiscal track. And while I was out working in human services, Susana was in the legislature voting for all the unbalanced budgets, pension holidays, and tax increases that actually put us in this place under Speaker Madigan.
How about that, Susana Mendoza? You were in the legislature from 2001 to 2011 or 12, and one of the editorials supporting your opponent indicated that you voted yes on the kinds of budgets, skipping pension payments and so forth, that have now gotten the office that you're running for into the jam it's in.
So look, I served in the legislature very honorably. I voted to make sure that kids were able to go to school on time, that senior citizens received the funding that they needed to be able to survive with some semblance of dignity. Over the years, I've done my part. However, I didn't create this mess. And this has existed.
You didn't vote for the budgets that...
I did vote for budgets that were balanced. They were balanced using other mechanisms, because since day one, we were never able to have Republicans want to have some skin in the game. I mean, it'd be nice if we actually had some help from the other party. But let me just say, this issue with unbalanced budgets or the fiscal crises has been going on for decades, well before I was in the legislature. And at the end of the day, this governor was elected, and he picked his hand-picked appointee, as she calls herself, his wingman, to make things better. And by every account, even Crane's Business Magazine, which tends to go Republican, has said that this administration under Governor Rauner has been a complete failure. By every measurable account, the state of Illinois is doing worse than we were 2 years ago. They were supposed to make it better, and you have helped them make it worse. That's just the truth.
I'd just like to add in here. I'd just like to add in here that when I was sworn in, we had $8 billion worth of bills that we can't pay. Today we have 10. When Susana ended her time in the legislature, we had $10 billion worth of bills we cannot pay. We had balanced budgets when we started in the early 2000s. In the 10 years that she was in the legislature, she voted for unbalanced budgets. We had $30 billion in unfunded pension liabilities before they took 2 years of pension holidays. We ended up with $75 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. All of these things collectively now are creating the financial crisis we have today. There has been routine in the state spending money we didn't have. She says she was voting to fund schools and to fund the elderly. It doesn't help to promise funding when there's no money to write the check. They overspent the account year after year after year, and as a result, in 2011, we had $10 billion worth of unpaid bills. You know, we still have unpaid bills. The debt is crushing. It's because of terrible fiscal practices for many years.
Susana Mendoza.
Yeah. Oh, would you like me to answer that?
Yeah,
I think it's a great point, because here's the deal. For the last 21 plus months now, the state of Illinois has become significantly worse by every single measurable account under this current administration. Prior to that, we've had 4 out of the last 6 governors be Republicans. This is an issue that has spanned generations and decades of ineffective government. But what's important now, and the office that I'm running for, Phil, with all due respect, is the office of the Comptroller, which was created by Constitution to be independent of the governor's office. And this person to my left just accepted $1 million from the very man that she's supposed to be being a checks and balance.
You've accepted $1 million plus from the unions. It's on special interest.
From hardworking men and women.
Given you contracts.
You know what? Let's talk about that. I've accepted contributions from hardworking men and women in organized labor. People like my father, who was a union pipe fitter, like my father-in-law, who raised 9 kids on an electrician's salary out of Local 176 in Joliet. Hardworking men and women who pay their dues and want someone who will fight for them and be an aggressive voice of advocacy, not somebody who takes their orders from the governor. People like my dad, though, let me get to this point, Phil, because with all due
Susana
respect.
Mendoza, you have significant financial support from labor,
Yeah,
organized
I'm
labor,
proud
but
of it.
you took $1,000 from an O'Hare contractor who's had a contentious relationship with labor. Does that conflict with your pro-labor stance?
If anything, that just shows that I'm independent and I'm not beholden to labor or anyone else. And by the way, when she talks about dismissing labor as like they're the bad guys, they're not the bad guys. They're hardworking men and women, people like my father. And with all due respect, people like my father who have helped make this country better, this state better, who is a hardworking immigrant, the same type of people that Donald Trump, who she still refuses to admonish after everything he said about women, about sexually assaulting them, mocking the disabled, and saying that immigrants like my dad are rapists and murderers. Instead of denouncing that, she sits down and has lunch with him 3 days after making those comments.
I'd like to go back
Leslie
to the
Munger?
point on the labor. So
How
I've
about the
actually
issue of
been
Trump? What is your current stance on Trump?
So
just out
I,
of
as
curiosity.
a state officer, the chief fiscal officer of a state with the worst financial condition that we have in the state, I've really been very focused on trying to look for ways to unite us to work against
Do you
it.
support
There's a
Donald
lot
Trump's
of,
candidacy?
Yeah,
I'm really
please say.
working very hard to stay out of the issues at the top of the ticket, because no matter who you talk to, there's divisive situations on both sides. You certainly cannot support a lot of the things that Mr. Trump has said.
Will you be voting for him?
My personal vote is my personal vote. I have stayed out of this deliberately, intentionally, because as a chief fiscal officer of the state of Illinois, I'm 100% focused on trying to focus on helping the state. And we have so much divisiveness right now in our state. What you hear from my opponent is continuing to try and divide us. And I am really trying to work to bring people together to focus on the key issues of the state.
Let's get back to the back to the issue.
And I just like to add, I'd like to add one more thing. I'd like to add one more thing about the labor, because she commented about labor. I stood up to the governor on fair share union dues in support of labor. I went to court against the Attorney General to get union employees in the state paid. I worked with AFSCME to help them to go with the governor to get approval so we could pay their travel vouchers and continue to keep them on the job. I negotiated my own labor contracts in our office with not an issue at all, very helpful. So I actually have a good record of working with the union laborers in the state, even though she would say otherwise.
No, it's not what I say, Phil, honest to God. I mean, this is like amazing that I'm even hearing this. Her campaign chairman, Elizabeth Brandt, is the mayor of Lincolnshire, her hometown, your hometown. That was the only municipality in the entire state of Illinois to pass right-to-work legislation.
I've not had anything to do with that. And you are the campaign chairman for Rahm Emanuel. Would you like to?
Okay.
Would you like to own everything Mayor Emanuel's done?
Rahm is not on the ballot, right? No, but she's still your campaign chairman.
And
by the way,
neither is
besides that,
excuse me, if we could back up for a second, I guess one of the things that interests me is the rap against you is you're going to be beholden to Mike Madigan. The rap against you is that you're beholden to the governor. To what extent is there a connection between what the governor does, what Mike Madigan does, and how your offices are run? Leslie Munger, I'll begin with you.
Well, fundamentally, we need to get the legislature and the governor to work together to get a budget passed. And really, that's what we need in the comptroller's office. We need a balanced budget so that we promise to spend, we can actually pay for. I've spoken out throughout my time as comptroller, asking everyone to get together. I've been very even-handed, and actually the newspapers all around the state have called me out for being very even-handed and trying to work collaboratively to get a budget put together and to help encourage that.
Susana Mendoza, as a matter of fact, the political endorsements from the Sun-Times, the Tribune, have gone in the way of your opponent. Would you care to take issue with those endorsements?
Well, I mean, I think they have their opinion, right? They have their opinion. I was the same candidate today that they endorsed glowingly 5 years ago. There's lots of reasons why they could have chosen to stick with the person that's there now. But the reality of it is that what she doesn't want to answer, and it's easy to talk and deflect, is that the reason why she hasn't denounced Donald Trump, and let's be honest, it takes a half a nanosecond to know where you should be with Donald Trump with everything he's said, is that not only is Elizabeth Brandt her campaign chairman, and you know that's true, she's still on the document.
She has nothing to do with my campaign. You're still Rahm's campaign
More importantly, Donald Trump, his chairman of his campaign here in Illinois is her campaign finance chairman, Ron Gidwitz. And
no, he's
the
not.
Yulin family, of course he's not, right? Yulin family, who is one of her second largest contributors for $2 million, is on Donald Trump's economic team. It shouldn't take you a lot of thought to decide and tell voters honestly whether or not you're for Donald Trump.
Well, perhaps you'd like to talk to one of your mentors, Alderman Ed Burke, who also does business with Donald Trump.
He's not on the ballot. You and I are on the ballot.
You know what,
Let's talk
Susana,
about where you stand and where I stand.
You are out
on
protesting candidates. You know, it's so not helpful to be divisive in this. I'm really trying to work to unite people in the state. This is a very divisive issue. There's a lot of craziness at the top of the ticket.
Starting with Donald Trump.
Both sides of the aisle. I think we hear that no matter what news program you turn on. I'm trying very hard to just be a leader in the state.
Let's get back to something you did, Leslie Munger, and that is in April. You moved to have state lawmakers wait for their paychecks along with everyone else that Illinois owes. But you waited until the state had been without a budget for 10 months. Why did you wait?
I waited because we've been operating under the law passed by the legislature that ensured that they were paid every month, whether or not we had a budget. And we all saw what happened when Governor Quinn tried to stop paying the legislators. So I needed to follow the law, which I'm bound to do as a controller. And as soon as I figured out how to follow the law and yet put pay at the back of the line, I did it. And there's been a lot of criticism from my opponent on that, but frankly, she didn't come up with the idea before I did. I enacted it, and now she's tried to claim it in her commercials, dishonestly saying that she would put legislators in line when I did it in April.
It's not being dishonest.
Do you agree with the move
yes, of course. That's why
delay the payment?
It's not being dishonest to say that legislators should not get preferential treatment. So I would continue that policy. What I object to is the fact that she waited until election time to come find religion on this issue.
I did not wait till election time. I waited until April.
And she chose by her own admission to continue to pay politicians and herself before paying social service providers.
Well, I just
and
like to-
now, after the fact, went ahead and continued. Now it's the second time. There's $7 million worth of bonuses, performance bonuses that went out to state employees.
I'm bound to pay the pay tapes as they come in. I'm bound to pay them on time. It's the law. I'm under court order to do that. I cannot go in and figure.
Bulletins, Phil.
So
is that a legitimate point
It
that
is a
by
legitimate
issuing
point.
and accounting both, and
No.
you can
It's about
you can have them
transparency.
you can have
we're
the
running our
agencies
state
break
without a
out.
budget. We're running our state without a budget. We have no budgets. We can't close any of our books. There's no control on spending right
about
now,
opening
which
up
is
the
why
books.
we need to have a budget in place. Every payment the state makes is online. It's on our website. It's called the Ledger. People can go in and see where payments are being made.
So there's no way you can find out how much of
No.
what you're
No.
issuing
There
is a
one thing-
bonus and how much.
there
One
is,
thing
Phil.
that
She says there is, you're saying
No,
there isn't.
there isn't,
Let's move
because
on.
our
Susana
state-
Mendoza, your opponent has charged you with double dipping. Pay for work with the City of Chicago at the same time you served in the General Assembly. Is that true?
Absolutely not, and she knows it's not true, but she continues to spend her $9 million
it's
from
true.
3 people spreading false allegations. That's been disproved. It was disproved in 2008. We've disproved it to all the media networks. I'll be happy to provide you the documents that disprove it again. She can
was
continue
not
to say it
disproved.
over and over and over. It doesn't make it true, Phil. What is true is that she did wait 10 months, went ahead and paid politicians, herself included. You received your money before telling social services providers that was their turn.
I
But
put my
just for-
paycheck.
just for
I never
clarity's
my
sake-
paycheck at the back
Never
of the
double
line.
dipped.
I put my
Ever.
paycheck at the back of the line.
Just for clarity's sake, Susana Mendoza, you never received pay for work with the City of Chicago at the same time you served in the General
That is
Assembly.
correct. And the
you're
documents
saying
are there
you're
to
saying
prove it.
She is. She had paycheck for the City of Chicago for 16 years. For 10 of those years concurrently, while she was in the legislature, she received a state of Illinois paycheck as the legislative pay. She presented a document showing for 1 year she had 44 days of pay withheld during her session
It was
time.
an example of
She
the many
was
documents we
paid
had, Phil.
nearly $60,000 in her early years as a state rep. The state rep job is not a 44-day-a-year job.
And a real quick response, and then we'll move on to something
Sure.
else.
I have the
Pensions
document.
built,
Can I
would
finish?
I'd just like to say,
Sure,
the
go ahead.
pensions that she built, the 2 pensions she built simultaneously, are consistent with being paid fully on those salaries.
They're not. And I'll provide you the documents. You'll see all the proper deductions. I was never paid by the City of Chicago for days in which I was working in the legislature. I went out of my way above and beyond what any normal person would do in documenting that.
documents don't say
So
that.
you can ignore the facts all you want. You do that all the time, Comptroller, with all due respect. But the reality of it is that she is continuing to lie. But you can buy a lot of lies with $9 million from 3 billionaires, you know?
Let's move on. You both have different views on Governor Rauner's turnaround agenda, but does supporting a governor's policy priorities really have an impact on the job of Comptroller Munger?
You know, I've been a strong proponent for some reforms, not all of the governor's reforms, but some of the reforms that we need to get our state back on track. The debt we have built right now in the state is so large that in order to get out of it, it's not just simply raise taxes like we've done before and shrink our economy. We need to look at ways to take cost out of our state, be operating things more efficiently. We
And
need
it
to
would
look
have
at
an impact on
revenues.
the job that you do.
Because we would have a budget that's balanced.
Susana
We need to get a
Mendoza, is there a
balanced
connection
budget.
between the two, a turnaround agenda and how you would do your job?
Sure, it's more of a turn upside down agenda. That's what it's done to this state. And frankly, this governor, while some of his ideas, let's say they're all worthy of debate. This is a deliberative process by design, where democracy is supposed to be taking forth an idea, debating it, and voting on it. But it should not be held in exchange for passing a balanced budget. He's not even willing to sit down with anybody to actually work out a balanced budget unless if they pass his turnaround agenda items first. And
Because
that's
we cannot get to a
unacceptable.
balanced budget
It's
without
never
some of
been
those
the
changes.
case.
It's
Phil, can I please
financially
speak?
impossible.
It's never been the case ever in the history of our state that a governor has been elected and said, you either pass what I want or I won't even think about passing a budget. And that's why 2 years after the fact, by every measurable account, the state of Illinois is doing worse than ever before in our history.
Leslie Munger, polling earlier this month showed that your opponent has an 8-point advantage, though with a significant number of people undecided. Is she gaining traction with her message and you're not?
That was before any of our advertising started. I think the numbers have changed, and the race is quite tight right now, according to everything that we've seen. I'm sure she would probably say the same.
Oh, a final question. Without mentioning your opponent, Susana Mendoza, and I'll ask you the same question, Leslie Munger, why are you the right person to be Illinois Comptroller?
Are you asking her?
No, I'll begin with you.
I'm sorry. Why am I the right person? Because
Without mentioning her.
Sure, okay. Because the state of Illinois is in its worst fiscal crisis in the history of our state. And you need an independent, truth-telling fiscal watchdog who has a history, as I do, of standing up to leaders in my own party, not just Speaker Madigan, but also leading impeachment efforts against Governor Blagojevich, standing up to Mayor Emanuel at the height of his popularity, and also being able to work well across the aisle, get things done. As city clerk, I've transformed the office of the city clerk, taking it out of the Stone Ages into the modern age. What was once seen as an office that shouldn't even exist is now an office that is generating $50 million in new revenue without asking taxpayers to pay more. We eliminated the hours-long lines. It's a 5 or 10-minute wait at most. I have shown that I can do more with less for taxpayers, and I'm eminently qualified, not just from my experience and relationships that still exist from my days in the legislature of working well across the aisle, but also as a tested and proven executive manager running the second largest office in the city. I'm ready for this next challenge.
Comptroller Munger, why are you the right person to be Illinois Comptroller to keep your job, in essence?
I'm the right person because I am the most independent person here, because I'm not part of any of the problems of the past. I came into this job with 25 years of private sector business experience. I led the $800 million U.S. hair care business for Helene Curtis, and I've had to manage budgets, and I've had to deliver financial expectations for my company and for my brands. I also have spent nearly 20 years serving as a volunteer in human services, some of those years on a board of directors, and I understand personally how hard it is when our state runs without a budget on these organizations. So I bring a mix of both financial and a big heart for human services to this role. I have led by example since I've been in this job. I cut my own budget, turning back millions of dollars to taxpayers. I've led a program, a new initiative to help transform our state's decades-old COBOL-based systems, which is frankly one of the reasons why we cannot break out those payroll tapes, to upgrade those and bring in a cloud-based system. I put the legislative pay, all elected official in pay, in line with the state's bills to show that we're all in this together, while at the same time prioritizing pay for human services. I'm leading a new initiative called No Budget, No Pay, which will put teeth in our constitutional requirement that will ensure that when our legislators work collaboratively with the governor, they work together to pass and sign a balanced budget by the end of the legislative session, which they're required to do. And if we don't get paid.
And that's where we'll have to leave it to Susana Mendoza, Leslie Munger. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks very much.
We appreciate very much when candidates come on our show. Thank you.
Thank you for
Phil.
having us.
Appreciate your time.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.